Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to this sort of South Wales and West of England branch sort of sponsored webinar. I'm Martin Gosden. I'm the branch co-chair. Some of you will have met me before, some of you won't. So it's the second one of these we've done. We did a virtual networking event sort of early on in September, which went down well. So this is the first sort of a normal CPD event we're doing this time, which is good. So we're looking forward to it very much indeed. This event was planned earlier this year on the 16th of June. Well, of course, one or two things got in the way. So we're very grateful that sort of Lucy Finney has agreed to sort of redo the event that we had planned tonight, which is actually fantastic. So she's going to be talking about intelligent conflict management and how to deal with conflict in teams. This is one of the conflict management is one of the sort of top requested events that we have down in this sort of South Wales and West of England area. So hopefully that sort of matches in with everyone else's expectations as well. One thing I will ask, please, I'll ask it now, is there'll be evaluation sheets which you'll get at the end of the after the event. Please let us know what you think. It's very, very important that we actually sort of get your feedback to let us know what you sort of did like, didn't like, and also more importantly, what you want to hear from us, what events you want us to lay on in the future. So please do take the trouble to go ahead and do that. We've got some other events coming up, which are specifically branch focus events. There's lots of other webinars already planned, which Rob has already been showing on the screen to you. On the 25th of November, it's not been quite finalised yet, but we hope to get it finalised next couple of days. We're going to revisit Hinkley Point C, and so we're going to be looking at the cooling tunnel project, which is massive tunnels going out in the Bristol Channel, and looking specifically at the project controls environment for that. So it'll be quite fun. We will be visiting some events we've done on Hinkley Point C before. Just to let you know as well, first time for which everyone can get involved with, the APM is running its annual general meeting on the 16th of November. So please get involved in that. I'm going to go to my first one as a virtually this time, so I'm looking forward to that rather than just dragging up to sort of Princess Risborough. And the same night, which is something I'm very interested in because I'm on the awards steering group for the national awards. We've got the national awards sort of celebration evening as well. Again, virtually rather than a big dinner up in London, but it means it's open to everyone to attend to see what a fantastic celebration it is of our profession. So please do register and sign up for that. We're back then to one of our own events, which is the sort of another virtual networking event on the 2nd of December. And at the moment, we've got something planned as well for February, and that's the 24th of February. And we've got the Benefits and Values SIG going to do a values event for us, which will be interactive in the evening. So you'll get a lot out of it and actually take part in actually creating some sort of value management sort of input as well. So without further ado, it's now my very great pleasure to introduce our speaker for tonight. That's Lucy Finney, MBE. She's Head of Leadership Development at Underscore Group. Lucy has some questions for you before she really starts, which will be on Slido, hence the slido.com and your sort of invitation to get signed up to that, please. And so Rob Allen, our administrator, is going to take us through that and deal with the questions first before then handing over to Lucy. So Rob and Lucy, thank you very much indeed, and enjoy the evening, everyone.
Excellent, thank you, Martin, and good evening, everyone. I'm Robert Allen, APM Branches Manager. So as mentioned by Martin, we're really keen to have some interaction tonight, and Lucy's outlined some questions. So if you could go to your mobile phone or another web browser and go to slido.com, then input the code Q542, and then we'll start the questions on there. So I'll start the first one. So we're really keen to know how much of your time in projects is spent managing conflict. So I'll leave that open for a little bit longer. Be great to get some, okay, so people are already completing it, which is great. So as I say, the link is slido.com and the code is Q542. So I can see it rapidly going up. I know we've got over 100 people with us at the minute, so we've got 30 responses at the minute, so I'll give it a little bit longer. But Lucy, I guess you can see this as well, 25% seems to be leading the way, with 10% about halfway behind, 50%. So I'll just give it a couple more seconds before we move on to the next question. And none is on 0%, so everyone's experiencing some kind of conflict in their projects. And I'm sure Lucy will help us during this session. So I'm going to hit the 60 and then I'm going to move on. 59 and 60. So yeah, Lucy, it clearly looks like 25%, the winner with 10% in second place, and joint on 50% and 50 plus. So thank you everyone for joining in. We'll move on to the next one. So the next question is, how do you rate your current conflict handling skills? So is it 0? Is it poor, above average, awesome? Let's hope we get the awesome jumps up a little bit. But again, I'll leave this open until we hit about 60. So it looks like average about 63% is the winner, above average about 23%, and then poor, awesome, and 0 has 0. So finally, and this will be one that we leave up for the duration of this, because it's more typing in your comments, but what behaviours have you seen when you have encountered conflict in your projects? So again, we'll just leave this up for a couple of moments to see some of the answers. Yelling, okay. I don't know if someone's telling me that I'm yelling at you right now. I hope that's not the case, but stress-based, defensive, frustrations, going behind people's back. It's changing all the time. I'm struggling to keep up with the words, but yeah, it's great. Unclear goals, which is great. So I'll leave this up for a little bit longer for you, Lucy, and everyone, just to show what we're. And it's really good that so many of you have taken the time to join in, and this certainly helps Lucy with the upcoming session. Stress base, so defensive, frustration, confusion, aggressiveness, passive aggressive, anger. Some really quite negative words there. Seems to be the flavour at the minute. Temperamental, stubborn, grumpy. I don't know if I can say these are really good words or not really good words, but Lucy, what I'm going to do now is I'll just pass over to you to continue your presentation. While Lucy's just setting that up, we are keen for your interaction tonight, and Lucy's very much keen to answer your questions. So please feel free on your control panel to submit your questions, and we'll ask those time dependent at the end. Lucy, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Do you hear me all right? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, good evening, everybody. So I have been introduced, which is great. I don't need to go through that a little bit. What I would perhaps like to just take a couple of minutes to do is to just, for those of you who don't know me, I have done several talks before within the APM and several webinars. So some of you on here may have been to those before. But let me give you just a little bit of insight into my background to explain why I'm here talking to you about conflict. So many of you can hear online that I'm from Northern Ireland. I grew up in the troubles of Northern Ireland, where violence, bombing, shooting, just the norm. In fact, my earliest memory was actually surviving a bomb scare in Belfast. So very early on, I became aware of conflict, and in fact, it was all around me, and it was kind of a way of life. I just grew up in it. After that, I went off to university, and then after that, I actually joined the British Army. So I have a career behind me being in the Army. I was actually an educational and training services officer, specialised in the middle of it, and did a master's in design and information systems. And this took me into weapons systems projects. So I have this kind of twin background of technical and leadership development, and that's. So what I'm talking to you about today actually comes from a real practitioner background, but also from when after I left the Army, I embarked on gaining a qualification as an executive coach, and I've used that in my business and in my projects extensively. And I'm also a qualified practitioner in 8 different psychometrics. So I use that, I'll be using that today to just help you understand a bit more about conflict, conflict in projects, and conflict in teams. In fact, to just illustrate how useful this is, one of the psychometrics I qualified in early on is Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. Some of you may have come across that, some of you may even have completed that psychometric profile. But you may not be aware that psychometric actually evolved out of studies during the Second World War on why people fight. The authors of the psychometric were very concerned about conflict in the Second World War, and so they embarked on a whole set of extensive research and looking into how personality drives behaviour. And the output of that was the psychometric tool Myers-Briggs. So one of the things that I really want to emphasise in this webinar, that things like that, understanding your personality, understanding your behaviour, if you can start to understand that first and become perhaps a little bit more self-aware, this will really help you in managing conflict. So the topics I'm going to cover are: what is conflict and why does it happen? How your personality drives your behaviour and how this can lead to team conflict, and how to manage conflict to achieve positive outcomes for all involved. I just again emphasize that regardless of which area you work in, at some point in your career, you will come face to face with conflict. And in fact, that survey we just did beforehand in Slido, I think it was 0% answered 0. So you've all encountered some form of conflict in your life or in your career as a project manager. As I say, to manage it, you need to start to understand what it's about, why it happens, and your role in any situation which you may find yourself in where conflict is taking part. And you need to understand that first before you can really start to develop and apply conflict handling skills. And you really need to get that side of things before you can really understand how to align teams in your projects to work together towards shared goals. So I titled this webinar Intelligent Conflict Management. So what is that about? In actual fact, what it's really about is using and applying emotional intelligence to manage conflict in a given situation. When we're doing leadership development, we follow a kind of philosophy, which is that you need to understand yourself before you can manage yourself, and you need to understand others before you can manage others. So the start point of really developing your conflict handling skills is beginning to understand yourself and then develop your emotional intelligence. What you see on the screen here is a variety of the things that need to really be developed to become good at intelligent conflict management. So obviously we've got the start point down here, which is self-awareness. Then we talk about discipline and self-control. That's managing yourself in a given situation. Integrity is another area when we talk about this subject. Integrity is about demonstrating and doing what you say you will do. So following up on the things that you say that you will do and being honest and open. Mastery of negative feelings, and this is about really understanding how your thinking drives your behavior and choosing, perhaps, which is down here, positive emotions, choosing to focus and apply the optimism in a given situation. We also have creative problem solving, learning how to solve problems, learning about the systematic way to solve problems. And then we move into much more of a sort of constructive, the interpersonal area. And this is about constructive interpersonal interaction, relationship building, understanding how to build respect and being respectful in any situation and applying some sort of constructive empathy into the situation. And there's one last one down here that I would talk about, which is actually something called abundance thinking. And this comes out of Franklin Covey, actually. And in his work, one of his philosophy behind his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is abundance, adopting an abundance mentality. And what this means is that you look, instead of, it's 2 kind of mentalities, thinking abundantly or thinking in terms of scarcity. And when I was just wondering, thinking about how I explain this to you, you can, it's quite simple right now. You can see it in all that's happening around you. When lockdown first happened, people went into a state of panic buying. That was a scarcity mentality. And as a result, what do we see when people do that? We see conflict. We see people fighting. We see people really much going after, looking after themselves. So one of the philosophies that Stephen Covey really throws in there is to adopt an abundance mindset, which is that in the case of a project, there's plenty of work to go around. We all have a role to play. Rather than fighting to be the kind of the super leader in a project, it's about really being open and sharing and engaging everybody and being inclusive and bringing them on board, because there's plenty of work to do. And this is all part of having that mindset will really help you to manage conflict. So if we look at what is conflict? What's a simple definition of conflict? So I looked this up actually, because when I started to think about it, I thought, well, you know, how do I actually define it? It's something we all know about from a very young age, but how do you define it? So the simplest definition is it's a struggle between opposing forces, ideas and interests. So opposition between two simultaneously but incompatible wishes or impulses, leading to emotional tension. So then when I was thinking about this, you know, I thought, well, what does the APM say about it? So if you actually look in the APM book, they say that conflict arises when there are differing opinions, so they're agreeing with the previous definition, or opposing interests between stakeholders that matter to the people involved. And these issues are often not easily reconciled. So conflict can be associated with the task being undertaken, the process used to perform the task, or relationships between people. As I dug a bit more deeply in to understand, you know, how does the APM approach this? What does the APM sort of think about it, and what does it recommend for you in terms of developing your skills? If you actually look at the APM Competency Framework, you find out even more. So we have here a whole competency around conflict management. So it's the ability to identify, address, resolve differences between people. You've got information there. You know, just take a moment. I'll just let you have a moment to just read that and refresh in your mind what that competency is. So I did these two little diagrams on either side of this to summarize this. What we're talking about here is in terms of the application of conflict management is being able to anticipate conflict, being able to recognize the signs, being able to resolve the issues, take prompt action. And that seeks help is about knowing where to go to get help. So almost knowing your boundaries, knowing when you need help and where to get that help from. And then not thinking, well, I've just handed this off, but actively managing situations and monitoring them to resolve the issues. And over here, when they're talking about, in terms of conflict management, what is the knowledge you need to have? You know, we need to understand what's the potential impact of conflict. And you know, this one down here, they actually talk about the benefits of impact, the benefits of conflict. This conflict does actually have benefits, which I'll explain in a minute. Again, knowing how to take preemptive action, knowing and being able to see the indicators, understanding the models and techniques, which I'm just going to introduce you to some of those in the webinar. And again, understanding and having the knowledge about your network and your system of specialist help, which you can get to help you in your situation. So to understand how to deal with conflict, which is what you're really here about tonight, and what I want to do is take a moment to just reflect on teams and team dynamics and what goes on within teams that causes conflict. So many of you on here will be aware of Tuckman's model, and if you're not, this is a model that has been around for a long time, explaining how teams develop. So teams go through stages whenever they develop, and you're all project managers on here, or program managers, and you've been through this cycle, no doubt, in your life, where you've been got a team, formed it, it's gone through a storming stage, it's entered a norming stage, you've all performed the project well, hopefully, and then the project team's broken up again, and you're off into another project team, or you may need to bring that team back further down in the project. But what I want to highlight here is that in each of these stages, conflict can happen. And there, when it talks about earlier in your competency being able to identify and sort of preempt the situation, from the moment you start to form a team, you need to be aware of the kind of signs that are indicating either that there's underlying discontent or that the conflict is going to happen within the team. So look for some, the sort of signs to look for would be, in the case of forming here, you've got low levels of social talk at worst. So you get that team together, they're not talking very much. Alarm bells should start to go up. What's happening here? People are very guarded and neutral. They're careful about group discussion, and there's little evidence of real commitment to the task. Can you imagine that team shuffling in and about to get started on your project? Perhaps at this stage it's so new in formation they're not very committed to the task. They don't maybe even understand the task. Good signs might be lots of chatter and talk, excitement about the project, and the beginnings of open, trusting discussions. People take time to get to know each other. It's very important at this stage, if you want to avoid conflict, to put effort into building trust within the team, to creating a climate where people will feel open and will share, and where people will take some time to get to know each other. A thing that's actually quite difficult now when we're working in the virtual world, and teams are forming all the time, new project teams are forming all the time. We've had the way we used to do it is gone. We have to form this trust, build this trust virtually. That is a new challenge and can be quite difficult, and it's going to be here for some time now. Now, teams naturally move on quite quickly to the stage storming. This is one where I'll just emphasize one thing in this webinar for you all to think about and accept. Conflict is actually normal. Conflict will occur in teams, whether you like it or not, and it particularly forms as people have gone through that forming stage. Early on, what you'll get is a lot of egos being pushed, a lot of people trying to find their position, and conflict will build, and you'll get certain signs will again be here. Now, we all have seen that stage. Often when we get together in project teams, what happens is we'll have this storming stage, and we might move quite quickly through to norming, but we will return to storming. This is not a situation where you go through, we formed up, we pass through storming, we're all nicely norming, and we go into performing. No, what happens is teams will pass back and forward in these stages, and that's because what's happening in those stages, as well as egos push forward, you're actually getting creative problem solving taking place. And that's when I say, we said earlier about the benefits of conflict. Actually, conflict, if it takes place, is just people challenging ideas, and if people feel confident and positive and they feel they're able to speak up, that storming phase can really be harnessed. So what you get is things like good signs, striving to move forward, acceptance of different points of view. Important thing here is to really encourage some realism in what people are doing, so they don't sort of try to move too quickly unless it's an emergency. But you'll see people being realistic about goals and challenging plans at this stage. Other things that aren't good to see are attempts to export the team problem, and what happens there, that's the blame bit. We had people talking earlier about the behaviour they've seen in conflict, and blame, I noticed, was a word that came up there. Yes, that's what starts to happen. When people start to talk about that, they're not at a stage of really taking ownership of what they're doing, and so they're trying to export the problem. They may be setting up unrealistic expectations, or then they may be just going headstrong into something with their head in the sand and actually not accepting what they're about to do, or even challenging it and not that it's unrealistic because they don't feel safe to speak up. If we can really apply some good conflict handling skills at this point, then we will move teams forward to the norming stage, and this is where they really start to collaborate, if you get it right. So sort of seems good signs here be teams move towards autonomy, they move self-management. You don't have to manage them as much. You might be a program manager on here and you've got several projects at once. And if you think of all those projects going on, you probably have some good project teams and some not so good project teams in your program. And those, just think about those that are doing well. They're the teams that are really working with autonomy, and they're managing themselves, and they've come together to be more of a we instead of an I. There's lots of people working together. But if you're still seeing, bad signs can occur at this stage where there'll be a lot of fight, anger, they'll slip back into the storming if that's not addressed. They begin to maybe see themselves separate from the parent organization. So a bit of a rogue project. Have you had any of those? Or rogue people within the projects. And this is where it starts to break up. If you don't manage conflict, you'll get cliques and subgroups will break away. Alarm bells need to go off at that point. Again, if we can manage to sort of focus on it, which is what you need to do, adopt a good conflict handling style, and you will be able to push them through this stage and move on to the performing stage. Now, at this stage, teams are normally highly collaborative, independent, and they work well together, delivering high results. And you can see there, the team is looking after itself, but you have to watch out for overambition. Routine and boring work may start to get neglected. The enthusiasm of the project is gone, and people need to work harder on it. They begin to run out of steam. So you'll have seen all of this happen over the last several months. Many of you may have had to start up new projects as a result of COVID and the situation that we're in at the minute. We may have had to deal with crisis situations, and you'll have seen people and teams move through all of these stages. At one point, because of time pressure, they may be performing well, and then they would drop back to a storming situation. I learned this model very early on in my career, and sometimes we forget it. It's a very simple model, and it's one to go back to your projects and think about again. What I would say to you is, have you seen this in your project teams? Have you seen any of these behaviours? Do you need to kind of pause and think, I might need to address that? Where does your team spend most of its time? Do you recognize any of these behaviors? So let's talk for a minute about that's the situation. So how do you deal with this? Now, another model that I just want to bring to you, some of you may have seen this before, and some may not. Excuse me, just take a quick drink. Thomas Kilman, there's 5 conflict handling style strategies. And what you're seeing in front of you there is a diagram that obviously you've got the 2 axes. One is about satisfying yourself, and the other one is about satisfying others. And you can see the 5 conflict handling styles here. We may be familiar with these: collaborating, accommodating, compromising, avoiding, and competing. Now, depending, on the situation, these styles are all actual valid styles, but some are better than others. Pardon me. So we have, let's take, for example, the competing style. The competing conflict handling style is really where you are used when you want quick decision making, like, for example, in an emergency. It may be one to apply when you're looking at important issues which are unpopular courses of action, which need to be implemented, for example, cost cutting or enforcing unpopular rules. But this is this sort of a situation where, if I apply a competing style, it's about me winning. It's much more about me than the others around me. And so I kind of win and you lose scenario. It can evolve out of that, and you have to be careful with it. Take collaborating though, that's one where you're looking to satisfy others and then satisfy yourself at the same time. And this is a real win-win kind of conflict handling style. So you might use this when you want to merge insights from people with different perspectives on a problem, or when you want to gain commitment to incorporating others' concerns into consensual decision making. It's a really good style for building trust. Then we might have sort of compromising. Now, this is a bit like collaborating, but it's a bit lower on the satisfying for you. It's still a win-win situation, compromising, but it might be necessary to kind of drop your standards, and maybe it's much more about trying to work towards that greater good. So what you're trying to do here is, you may use it when goals are moderately important, but not worth the effort of potential disruption involved in using the more assertive method like competing. And you might use it when you need to arrive at a sort of expedient solution under time pressure. You know, what is it? It's in engineering terms, it's a bit like the trade-off that's got to be done. So compromising is also a valid style, and it's necessary sometimes. Now, you'd think avoiding would be a style that's not a great one to adopt, but if you consciously think about a situation and you're thinking that, for example, you might perceive there's no chance of satisfying the concerns, so a bit like we agree, let's agree to disagree. So it's when you may also choose it when you recognize actively you've got low power in the situation and you're frustrated by something that would be very difficult to change. And so you can make an active choice that I'm going to avoid this because there's other things I need to do. But it is a lose-lose sort of situation. And in the other style, accommodating is about negotiating, and sort of, sorry, accommodating is a bit more like a lose-win situation. So it's when you realize that you're maybe wrong, and to allow a better position to be considered, you might decide to learn from others. So you step back, you're accommodating, and you let others take the lead. But above all in these, one of the ones that's really, really, you know, the one to try and achieve in a situation and to work towards is that collaboration where you'll really get that win-win situation, satisfy others and satisfy yourself. So looking at that, I'll ask you to be honest with yourself. Sort of which style do you prefer? Do you overuse certain styles? So for example, you know, I talked about my career, growing up in Northern Ireland, you know, lots of sports and activity when I was younger, joined the army, was around conflict for the first kind of 40 years of my life. Inevitably, I had a very competitive nature. And so when I came out first into business, this was something that actually got in the way of me being a project manager at times. My preferred style and default style was to go to competing. And that didn't always create a kind of good situation. So just, you know, asking you in your head to honestly think, do I do that? Do I overuse it? It's appropriate in some situations, but in others, it may not be. So what I'm going to do now is do a little thing with you to help you get a little bit more insight into yourself and how your personality can drive your conflict handling style. So I'm going to put in front of you in a minute a model, and this is a psychometric model. It's actually known as Lumina. And psychometrics, they sort of give you insights into your personality. And the one that's displayed in front of you there is a psychometric which measures your personality and displays an output in terms of 8 aspects. So there's 8 aspects of personality, and these are what are in the very highly colorful part of this, what's called mandala. So you have an aspect of personality that's down to earth, discipline driven, outcome focused, extroverted, big picture thinking, inspiration driven, people focused, and introverted. They are actually opposites on this map, but what I would say is that you can do, you know, you have aspects of all of this in your personality. This is not a restrictive model. So, you know, you may have done a psychometric before, which has come out and said, you're introverted, highly introverted. This does not label, because you can both display both the behaviors of being introverted and extroverted. So what I would like you to do is, with each of these aspects, there are 3 what are called qualities around the outside. So we've got 24 qualities of involved in your, you know, display your personality, and these are what really motivate you. This is what drives your behavior. So if you're people focused, for example, and you've got a quality that's collaborative, which is over here, okay, you'll naturally choose a collaborative leadership style. You'll be very good in those early days of shaping teams because you've got a very affiliative, participative leadership style. You'll want to handle conflict by adopting a collaborative conflict handling style, and you will behave collaboratively as your first place that you'll go to when working in a problem-solving situation or in a conflict situation. Likewise, though, if you're outcome focused here, which is really good at focusing on the task, really good at focusing on the outputs, and perhaps competitive does appeal to you, you'll be your choice may be to adopt a competitive conflict handling style, but you may be in an intense crisis, high pressure situation. Your leadership style will come to the fore and will really push teams forward in those intense scenarios. So you may choose, you just have to be a little bit aware that you may choose a competitive conflict handling style as a default, and just maybe moderate that sometimes and think about being collaborative. Likewise, someone who might choose a collaborative conflict handling style may have to sometimes step away from that and behave in a more adopt a competitive conflict handling style. So what I'd like to do is to look at these 24 qualities around the outside here on the diagram. Take a moment, and I'd like you to think about which of these, appeal to you. Which of these kind of describe you? You might go, aha, I'm a very logical person and I'm tough, but at the same time, I'm also quite imaginative. So, if being logical, competitive and tough appeals to you, plus being imaginative and radical, then you're described as what's called a red, yellow kind of personality. And you embrace change. You're creative and you're not afraid of taking tough decisions to get things done. Now, because of the time here, I can't go way off into all of this, but I just want to ask you to do one thing, is look at a particular word and say, which of those most appeals to me? And keep your eye on that word for a minute. Just pick one of those 24. Think that. So if it's logical, then keep an eye on logical, because these are the behaviors and the things that drive us when we are really working to our strengths. When we become stressed or we're in a conflict situation and we're not enjoying that situation, this is what can happen. So I say keep an eye, for example, on logical, and under stress, this can start to happen. You can become argumentative. So now these behaviors, you'll notice, have become a whole range of other behaviors that can be and qualities that can end up driving your behavior, and these can both create conflict and they can also come out as a result of conflict. So we've got all sorts of things in here, and some of these I didn't follow the word diagram being built up in the Slido earlier, but I think some of these were beginning to be mentioned by people. You were beginning to highlight, you'd seen these things like detached and aloof, serious and withdrawn. Have you seen people become consensus obsessed, chaotic, change for the sake of change? Just study these words and look, are you guilty of becoming over controlling? So it's a quick snapshot I want to give you into that to help you to understand that your personality, okay, when you're working to your best, then it's the other set of behaviors that take place. When you're under stress, be very aware that we can kind of flip to an overstretched side to these negative behaviors, and these can play into conflict. So first of all, be very aware of yourself and any of these behaviors appearing. And then what I'd say is be aware of others and what's happening with them. So let's move on now to look at teams. And one other model that I just want to bring to your attention is one that is called Lindsays' 5 dysfunctions of a team. I just want to emphasize to you that we're short of time, but this would be a thing that you could go and look into if you haven't come across it before. Lindsays actually did a lot of studies in teams and has written many books about this since. But one of the 5 things he says that are in teams whenever teams are not performing well are an absence of trust, a fear of conflict, a lack of commitment, an avoidance of accountability, and an inattention to results. So one of the things that I would say to you is, if you imagine that you can build trust early on in a team and do that and establish a climate of trust, establish something that is known as psychological safety in a team where people feel that they can be open and share and speak out. If you can do that and really make that work within your teams, then you will form a foundation that you will be able to overcome the fear of conflict in teams. Team members will speak up. They will begin to commit to the actual task at hand, and they will move towards being accountable and holding each other to account. And they will move towards a shared end goal. The shared goal is something that's very important in helping people to focus and move through a situation that may be full of conflict. So if we turn this model upside down, what I'd say to you is that to build cohesive teams, and if you look at a cohesive team, what you'll see is a behavior where they trust one another. They engage in unfiltered conflict around ideas because, as a leader, you've established a climate and acted with integrity and really helped people to feel free to speak up. People will then commit to ideas and plans of action. They'll hold each other to account, and they'll focus on achieving collective result. I encourage you to go and find out more about this, read more about this, understand it, because it'll really help you to understand how to handle conflict in your projects. And one other thing I want to just introduce you to, and just moving towards the end now, before I open up for questions, but I just want to highlight to you, in case you've not come across this before, there is actually an ISO standard for collaborative relationship working. 44001 is a collaborative relationship framework, and it's worth going and finding out about this. There's masses of information on it, and one of the reasons I'm highlighting this is it's interesting. I've just finished being a consultant in a major project, huge project, but in this particular project, the customer actually built into the contract that they made collaborative behaviour a mandatory requirement. Think about that. And they based the payment on demonstrating collaboration. Wow, that's a big one. And that was a huge challenge. To get paid, we had to demonstrate collaboration. And so they had actually built in the elements of the ISO 44001 into the contract. So I'm highlighting it because collaboration is very important, excuse me. And in the future, it could come in a lot more into your projects. And what I've done here is just aligned a couple of things onto here to show you. They have a list of all the behaviors that actually shows you that if you're doing them, then you are collaborating rather than fighting and having conflict. You're working as a team. So, take the one down that says collaborative behaviors, respect and trust building. So I've just aligned that to Lindsays to show you that if to overcome an absence of trust, you can do that by demonstrating the collaborative behaviors in that box, which is demonstrating respect, listening, and being open and honest. And to overcome conflict, it's really helpful being proactive, support others, and share information. And you've also got in the case of lack of commitment and avoidance of accountability, okay, we've got in terms of gaining commitment, engaging hearts and minds, demonstrating integrity and addressing issues. And the final thing there is the behaviour where you're demonstrating climate of accountability and you pay attention to results. And that's encouraging collaboration, joint working, delivering on promises. That's the integrity element of intelligent conflict management. And I'd encourage you to be very aware of egos coming out at this stage. It's about working as a team and focusing your team on your shared goals. So that's a very quick romp round through intelligent conflict management. Just coming back to this model that I started off with. These are areas which you can build on and you can think about if you wish to develop your conflict handling skills. But what I want to leave you with, there's some thoughts on this. So what I would say is, number one, be self-aware. Learn more about what drives your behavior. Perhaps complete a psychometric to learn more about yourself. Develop your emotional intelligence. Perhaps think about getting some coaching if you struggle in that area. Look to improve your interpersonal skills and understand the dynamics of teams. Never stop trying to understand the dynamics of teams. If you can grasp that, you really will get much better together with the emotional intelligence and understanding yourself at managing and dealing with conflict. Learn how to build trust in your project teams and demonstrate integrity. Walk the talk as a leader. In my mind, a project manager is a leader, and it's all about demonstrating that integrity, doing what you say you will do. Establish your climate of psychological safety. Help people to adopt accountability mindset. And I will end with sort of on an optimistic note, which is learn more about the power of optimism. There is a lot in positive psychology on how you can really, if you can really grasp that and bring that in and manage the negative feelings and negative thoughts that go on even within yourself or within your team, you can really turn teams around. So all of these skills will help you overcome conflict, they'll help you deal with conflict and manage yourself in the face of conflict, whatever field you're in. And with that, I'll just end the webinar. One thing I would just like to point out, if you want to note my email address there, that actually on the 19th of November, I am running a free Lumina workshop, where if you want to join us, find out more about the psychometric and more about yourself, there is an opportunity to get a free Lumina profile. So if you are interested in that, note my email address and feel free to email me and tell me that you were in the webinar and come along and join us and find out more. Okay, thank you very much. I think I'll hand back over to Martin.
Thank you, Lucy. This is Rob. Thank you for a great presentation. We've got some lovely comments coming through from people saying thank you very much for sharing your expertise. And oh, apologies. I think I'll move into the questions. And we've had a question from Catherine, who I suppose this is quite timely with the world that we currently live in. Have you seen any differences between conflict in this new virtual world compared to the old face-to-face world?
So, we could see conflict before in the past if we were in teams, because you can see a lot by people's body language. By the way, you just think of a project team you've been in that's been in high conflict. Think of the way people have behaved. Think about how they've stood or they've sat or how they've spoken or how they've projected themselves. You can see that taking place and your whole body is geared up to trying to read that. So in this virtual world, people can hide a lot. So I would say that probably this is something to really pay attention to now, sort of tune into people and spend some time finding out how people are and understanding the people in your team. Don't forget that part in the pressure to achieve a task, because these things can bubble away. They're not as visible as they were before, and they can really get sort of underneath and undermine your project. So, so pay attention to what's going on around you and your team. This is probably what I'd say there.
Excellent, thank you, Lucy. And apologies for coughing on that last question. Chris has said he tends to deal with and accommodate with senior managers. How can Chris get them to collaborate?
So that's a very good question, Chris. I do emphasise that that framework that I put up there, the ISO. It does describe a lot more about what collaboration is. If I'm honest, right, I would have an open and honest conversation with your senior leaders about what collaboration is. And you know, don't be afraid to engage in that conversation. We don't need to sort of hide behind it, because the thing we want to move towards is being more collaborative. If need be, you can describe what I've just explained to you just now about, you know, having it put into a contract. As a contractor, as a supplier, we had to demonstrate collaboration. I can tell you that was really challenging within our project team to do and to set up, to be monitored on that. So I just think highlighting it, bringing it to the table, telling people that collaboration is very, very important, and discussing what does collaboration mean for us. You're probably being more of a leader by challenging your leaders on that subject and getting to engage in that conversation and getting them to understand the importance of it and the value it brings to the output.
Excellent. Thank you, Lucy. And Chris, I hope that helps. Now, Ashok, I'm going to combine a couple of his questions. He first jokingly says he's going to have to pop off to the doctor because he has multiple personalities and he couldn't really identify himself on the wheel.
You can be everything.
He then continues to say, I think personality changes with time and situation. Do you agree with this, or do you have any additional thoughts around that?
I absolutely do agree with this. And then actually, you know, take, for example, the Myers-Briggs type indicator. There actually, the psychologists who evolved that psychometric actually have a thing there where they talk about in the midlife, we almost flip a little bit on our personality because we've become so good at what we do. We are who we are. We're quite well-formed characters. We've had experience. So, for example, if you've seen those things where people who have been maybe accountants all their life and very much into the detail of everything that they've done all their life, they suddenly retire and they want to become very creative. Imagine it, the next thing you know, they're off doing art and all sorts of things. That is an example of a change in our thinking, change in our psyche, where we want to explore these other parts of our personality. So we do change, we do adapt, we do shape, we are quite formed in terms of our personality preferences when we're quite young, but about midlife we do start to shape and change and want to try other things, because we're naturally curious beings. So our personality does change, and it is more dynamic than people used to think about, and that's why I emphasized in that psychometric. It's very important to understand we are dynamic and personality alters and change, and it is a lot of a link to the circumstances which you're in. Maybe if you reflect back on yourself, your personalities may well have changed in the last 6 months as a result of what we've gone through.
Excellent, okay. Thank you, Lucy and Ashok. I hope that helps. Some people again are saying some lovely comments, so thank you for a great webinar, Grasnia said, and then followed it up with this question. Some personalities perceive escalation as the only way to resolve conflict. Any suggestions on how to manage this approach?
So many things could be behind that. Some people can use escalation as a sort of passive aggressive activity, so that there could be a situation in a team where they don't feel safe to speak out and resolve it at the level that they're at. It could be, as you say, a passive aggressive activity, which is to escalate it without really trying to deal with it. So I think there, you know, what I would say is go back to that model that I put up and look at the overstretched side of behaviours. You know, where is that person at? Yeah, it's hard to know without the situation or the context, but often people, if they keep doing that and they keep doing that and not addressing the situation, they're not being accountable, they're acting passive aggressively, and they're not taking responsibility for trying to sort the situation out themselves. So they're not good signs if it ends up being destructive within the team. So unfortunately, the leadership thing to do is to hold them to account over it and really ask why they're escalating it. Because it's deferring responsibility. That's a great question, that. Thank you. Hopefully I've answered it for you.
Yeah, I'm sure Grasnir is very grateful for the input. Chris has said, this has been a very valuable experience, thank you. And then said, how would you recommend improving discipline and self-control alongside mastery of negative feelings?
Well, I run mental toughness webinars actually, where we address all of that. So discipline is really about learning how to manage your emotions. In fact, everything you've just said is about managing your emotions. You know, if you want things to start to read, think about things like the chimp paradox, which describes how to manage your emotions in terms of thinking about that side of you that you can't quite manage, which is actually a chimp, believe it or not. It does, though, behind it really get into neurodiversity, really get into helping people understand what drives their behaviours. If you can really understand what drives your thinking as well, you begin to understand what drives your those sort of negative thoughts and those things that you can't control. There's a whole series of tools that you can learn to really help you with that. But it is about starting to understand how you think and what drives your thinking, because that's always a start point. It's about how you see the world, how you perceive the world, and how you may adopt certain assumptions about the world which may not be logical or rational, and then you start to act out irrationally. If you start to believe those, even worse. So we have to always stop, check, think about what we're thinking, and understand how it's driving our emotions. That helps.
Excellent, thank you. Grasnir said, thank you very much for your comment on the last question, very helpful. So there's definitely time for a couple more questions if anyone wishes to submit any. I must admit we've covered all the ones, so I'm going to dive into the nice comments. So Darren has said, really thought-provoking, very clear, thank you. Ashok said, interesting points to consider, thank you. Laura, fantastic seminar, thank you. Lots of interesting concepts to dig further into. Andrea, excellent webinar. I really enjoyed this and food for thought. Beth, interesting webinar, reflecting on this a lot. So it seems like you've answered a lot of people's questions and given some great knowledge. Excellent. Could you just remind us that next session that you're doing later in the month?
It's on the 19th of November. And it is actually diving into personality and how psychometrics can help you. If people just email me on lucy.finney@_group.com, which was up on that last kind of slide, then what we'll do is collate people who are interested, and you will receive an invitation to come along. It's a 2-hour webinar. It's free, and I have to say, normally these psychometrics are quite expensive. It's a great opportunity to come along and learn and get some real insights into yourself and your personality, plus a useful profile tool that will really help you. It gets full of tips. There's 40 pages in the report, and it is full of tips and guidance and things that will help you in your work. And it's free. Yes.
Excellent. Now I'm going to be a little bit cheeky here, Lucy, if you don't mind, and just ask one more question. I did a shout out, and then Hannah's come back with a great session. Do you think that conflict can also create opportunity?
Yes, that's kind of one of the key points. I'm glad you brought it up to re-emphasize it. That's the thing. So it is about, conflict is natural. It's people working through problems. A lot of things can get in the way, like egos and things like that. But actually, if you kind of let it flow, if you harness it and you think about opportunities, it can lead to new opportunities. And conflict often happens because we're really under pressure. That's what's happened in the last 6 months. We've been in a lot of crisis. People have been under a lot of pressure. There's been a lot of conflict. But at the same time, it's created a lot of opportunity, and it's really unlocked a lot of creativity. So the very point that I'd like to make, and that's a great question again, is that conflict, it really is about managing it, because you can harness it and you can really turn it around and get much more creativity out of yourself and teams if you embrace it. Don't be frightened of it, is what I would say.
Excellent. I can see we've hit the half past mark. I can see there's one more, but would you be happy to take that one?
Okay, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so Salim has just said, what are your tips for international projects where different cultures, emotion, dynamics might play a part?
Yes, very good question. Well said. When you're working internationally and you've got a very multicultural environment, I think it's very important to understand the cultures that you're working with. You've got to take time, you've got to stop, and you've got to understand those cultures, what they value. And if you don't understand it, don't be afraid to ask them to find out. Get them to give a bit of a presentation on their cultures. Because a lot can happen in a multicultural team where they can get a lot of miscommunication, just even when it boils down to language and trying to talk through problems. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and at the root of it, it will lead to misunderstanding or an appearance of disrespectful behaviour, and that will just put people on the back foot, and people will not respond to you to help you. And you don't want that to happen. So you got to stop when you're going into a multicultural environment, take time to learn about the cultures, value diversity. That's what's really important. If you can master that, it's great fun. I've worked with cultures all across the world, and I love, be curious, go and find out more about them. Don't adopt a sort of I'm superior mode. Be respectful and go and find out about those cultures. That'll really help you and take you a long way.
Excellent. Thank you, Lucy, and thank you for taking the time to answer that additional question and also answering all the other questions that were submitted tonight.
It's been great.
So on behalf of the APM and the APM SWWE Branch and Martin and the fellow committee members, I'd like to say thank you for giving up your time this evening and your knowledge. It's been a great webinar. I'll definitely send you all these positive comments. There's been many more coming. So thank you. I'd also like to extend my thanks to everyone who's joined us tonight. The recording will be made available on APM YouTube. Definitely reach out to Lucy about her upcoming event, get involved in that. But most importantly, keep well, and we hope to see you at future APM webinars. Bye for now.
Thank you.